What's up, Samurai? We are back in more Trove, and today we're going to be tackling the 45k video with the Vanguardian. Now, keep in mind, I'm still working on my set of magic gems. I know I just keep telling you guys this, but it's a slow process because I'm not really going out of my way to do it, but that's why we don't have any 45k series videos with the magic classes in mind. Now, if I can, this week, hopefully I will be able to do a lengthy stream on gem day, and then we could end up like actually maxing out, and then I could finally start doing the magic classes. But anyways, for today we're going to be doing it with the Vanguard. Now, what this series entails, first let me go to the hub because I gotta show you skill tree stuff. What the series entails is I'm basically going to be giving you guys a prime example of just how powerful this class can end up being, and then you decide for yourself if it's something that you're interested in investing your time and effort into to get to the end game. Now, a lot has changed with Trove more recently that has made pretty much every character in the game very, very viable, and that is namely the skill tree, which is now finally available on all versions of Trove, including Nintendo Switch. Now, I'm still working on my skill tree, but generally speaking, you're probably going to want to end up copying the same setup that I have, because all of this stuff leads towards extra movement speed, extra light. There's some extra light here. There's some extra light here. These are the two trees that I'm still working on. And then way the heck up here, there's some extra movement speed. To me, movement speed is one of the top priorities, okay? But another thing that you could consider is right here, this is going to be damaging enemies grants 10% life leech. So this life leech makes you pretty much invincible. It's crazy. I already have another video that was on the test server, but the skill tree didn't really change that much. But I did talk about the ideal skill tree in where you want to invest all of your points. But the points themselves are extremely time gated, and as you can see, ooh, I can get another one. As you can see, they're very, very expensive, and they just keep getting more and more expensive. So it's kind of time gated in relation to the Astral Echoes Almanac. But anyways, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going to U11 Sundered Uplands, because these are the strongest enemies in the game. They have the highest resistance to light, which obviously is going to end up being your end game goal, is to have as much light as possible. But then on top of that, these enemies have a natural high resistance because for some reason the developers think that we're going to take advantage of the where the heck is it? Is it this guy that sells it? Yeah. So this guy basically sells us all these different bonuses for flight, but there's other NPCs like him that give us bonuses towards damage on enemies and so on and so forth. So we just kind of all unanimously ignore that because it's stupid and overpriced. Anyways, let me give you guys a 5-minute example of the true end game with this class, as well as just explaining, okay, how's this character going to fare? So this is without using any flasks. You can see again, because of that life leech, we are absolutely invincible. But on top of all of that, we've also got an insane amount of base movement speed, which does end up working with the fact that we can use our #1 ability to give us even more movement speed. But you can see that we're kind of lacking on damage when we don't end up, sorry, I gotta use volatile bounder. When we don't end up using a flask, it does hurt this class. I rhymed it on purpose. Yep, totally. Because this character is really, really good at speed farming, but not very good at damage output. And that's kind of always been the case with this class. And we haven't had a rework for the Vanguard for a very, very long time. We honestly haven't really needed to. Yeah, I guess I could just do some of the 5-star dungeon here, because why not? But essentially, the speed farming comes in 2 factors, which is going to end up being how fast can you travel from point A to point B, in which case the Vanguard is actually pretty speedy, or how quickly can you end up killing all of the enemies within the dungeon, which the Vanguard can do well if you end up using a flask. Because the other thing too is if you end up spamming your right click, then you could just be an absolute god and just destroy everything. Now, another thing too that we gotta talk about very briefly, just while we're doing this example, is the hidden ring effects for the Vanguard, because I'm not actually using a crystal ring for the Vanguard, because as you'll notice, I'm still Paragon level 1 with my Vanguard, because I never bothered actually investing any time and effort into this class. The 3 different effects are going to be as follows. Champions Congregate, which fired up, and Force Flash will now summon up to 2 nearby allies when used, which is decent, but not great. Combo, Energy Blast now applies the same damage increase that eye lasers applies. So basically when we tag an enemy with our lasers, it makes it so that we end up getting a damage buff, or more particularly, it will debuff the enemies and give them a defense debuff, essentially, right? And then the third one, Hero's Stand, Laser Leap and Hero's Charge grants a buff that heals while dealing damage for a short time. So generally speaking, as you can tell, the abilities on the Vanguard's Hidden Ring effect are not really ideal. The only one that I would go for, unfortunately, would be the one with the allies, just because the allies are the only ones that seem to have the most damage to them. And damage output is kind of the one crux of this character that is just not as good as some other characters. So you kind of have to compensate by having as many boosts as you can with the character, right? And so that's why I would personally recommend using that ability. I don't know if that's ideal, because generally speaking, you're just not going to be using range mode with this character. Like, it's just not good. Unanimously, nobody likes it, even though they did end up buffing the range mode quite a bit, which I guess I could show you guys just a quick example of that, so you kind of get a good idea of how quickly we're damaging all of these enemies. The other main reason why we use melee mode so much is because our number one ability gives us movement speed buff, but if we end up swapping to ranged, you know, our damage is okay, but it's not as good. And unfortunately, with the way ranged attacks work in this game, you don't really get much in terms of area of effect. So you're kind of stuck just fighting like single target, unless you can just barely tag two enemies, but it's just very unreliable. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. That's one of the main reasons why so many of the best ranged classes on the game are usually going to end up being boss killers, because there's not really much that you can end up doing ranged versus melee when it comes to doing dungeons themselves. Unless, of course, you have a class like, say, Shadowhunter, where you've just got such a huge barrage of damage output into a very specific area that it can kind of compensate for the fact that a lot of your shots are going to miss. Because that's the other thing, too, is projectile detection has always and will probably forever be an issue with Trove. And that's another big reason why a lot of the ranged classes kind of just fall off in terms of handling large groups of enemies and dealing damage to, you know, dungeon bosses and stuff, because a lot of enemies end up getting in the way. But anyways, without further ado, let's end up hopping into the delves. Oh, and you might have noticed, I shouldn't really be advertising this because it's out of my store right now, but I finally ended up getting my limited time Christmas Uggles sweater. Like, it finally ended up showing up, so it's pretty cool. It's really nice and warm, which is great for this season, but unfortunately it's out of the store. Another thing too that you might have noticed, I've just noticed it, that a lot of items on my store on YouTube says this product is unavailable, but it's still available on Teespring. It's just a glitch between the communication between YouTube and Teespring. I don't know why they don't resolve it, but anyways, we're gonna be dealing with a 136 delve, which isn't ideal in terms of a showcase. I know that, but when we're playing with the Vanguard, we're obviously not very powerful anyways, so it's not really that big of a deal. But on top of that, I just don't really have the time to end up going into super duper deep delves. It would require like maybe an hour's worth of my time off camera for every single one of these videos in order to end up getting my characters to a deep enough delve. That would be a good example, but just rest assured that the only real difference would be that we would be dealing a lot less damage. And if we're already, I won't say that we're struggling with these enemies, but you can see that we are not dealing an ideal amount of damage comparatively to other classes that we've tackled in the 45k series. We're still dealing a significant amount of damage just because every character is strong as nails now. But unfortunately, it's just kind of a side effect of this class, as I just keep on mentioning, is just that it takes a while to kill all of the enemies that are in your way. It's just, yeah. So speed for the class is perfectly fine. One thing that I've seen a lot of people do is you can end up using the Vanguard specifically for its speed. So what you would end up essentially doing is rushing to the end of the delve as quickly as possible, while everybody else ends up dealing all of the damage. And I know what you're thinking. Well, in the ideal situation, you're not going to be soloing delves. I know that. But my argument is that by showing the class off at an example of it just soloing the delve versus playing with a party, you're going to end up having similar results, except that everybody else is going to be carrying you a bit more, right? So anyways, now we're at the boss itself, so I'll see if I can end up dealing as much damage as possible using all of my lasers and so on and so forth. I guess, you know what? Here, let me swap over to Zealous, and then we'll reset this boss, because this will be a prime example to show you guys. Or does he not respawn? He might not respawn. I don't know if he respawns. Okay, well, anyways, this would end up being ideal for damage. I'd say that this is probably the most output of damage that you could have with this guy, because your laser is going to end up being where the brunt of it is. And I mean, you can see we're dealing like 81 mil and so on and so forth. Like, we're dealing a significant amount of damage, as I said previously. It's just comparatively to the other classes in the game that can easily deal over 100 mil. Like, yeah. But anyways, quick review of the class. Personally speaking, I use this character for speed farming many years ago, and it's only gotten stronger since. It's still a very fun class. That's kind of its main gimmick, I would say, is versus something like the Neo Ninja. Neo Ninja is technically a faster class in terms of speed farming, but Vanguard, in my opinion, is a funner class just because you don't have to face backwards all the time. Can you end up maining it for any specific category? Yes, except if you're doing Leviathans and stuff, you're going to want to do it with a group. You know, you're going to want to do delves and do generally everything with a group. But speed farming, you'll be fine. You can do delves solo, but it's not going to be ideal. And as far as just soloing Leviathans is concerned, I mean, you probably can do it, but I just wouldn't, you know. Anyways, that's going to do it for me today. Smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want to support the channel, and have a wonderful day, everybody.